When I made that video going over the setting of Tales of the EdgeWorlds, I didn't expect it to get nearly as much attention as it did. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that did watch it and left comments and likes. Thank you so much. So today we're going to talk about the protagonists of the stories. I'm only going to focus on the characters that I actually have artwork for. And now that I'm saying that aloud, I definitely need to commission more art for the cast at some point. Also, this is the cast of major characters so far, because the idea of Tales of the EdgeWorlds is there's a bunch of stories in the same universe, and there'll likely be other characters introduced into the setting, just as soon as I figure that out. But let's start with who is arguably the main character of the series. The origin of this character is probably a bit nuts. So he was the name and avatar of my main channel. As I did videos, I started coming up with a backstory for him and some side characters that used to crop up on the channel as a bit. But then I got to thinking, what if I actually gave this character a story of his own, like not tied to YouTube at all? Why is he a penguin? Because I think birds are cool, and I haven't seen a penguin character with the vibe I wanted for him. His name being edgy and his personality being like a 90s to mid-2000s edgelord type character was deliberate, because I like those kind of characters, and I'm tired of pretending it's cringe to like them. Nuclear hot take, I know. But Edgy is a violent, gun-toting bounty hunter with a short temper and an arsenal of weapons at his disposal. Dude does not understand the concept of restraint. At all. I made him a bounty hunter because it gave me an easy way to justify him going around the different settings and getting involved in crazy hijinks. Also because I like Cowboy Bebop and Spike as a bounty hunter. That probably had some influence, just a tad. But some other inspirations for his character are Shadow the Hedgehog and Ratchet from Ratchet & Clank. Specifically the PS2 game's version of Ratchet, where he's kind of a dick, especially in the first one. Hell, now that I think about it, Ratchet & Clank was a big inspiration for the whole universe. It certainly had an influence on the wacky weapons Edgy has, although his are a little more violent. The Shadow influence I think is pretty self-explanatory, given his color scheme and his affinity for guns. Dude would definitely blast I Am All of Me on his phone while leveling a city block. When it comes to what he took from Ratchet, I think he might be what Ratchet would have ended up as if he didn't stop being a jerk around the final act of the first game. But if those negative traits of his was taken to the extreme and put in an M-rated setting. He also has Ratchet's initial drive to go see the galaxy, and that's one thing Edgy does love is traveling across the EdgeWorlds, usually finding more chaos to cause or get involved in. Another thing he pulled from the characters that inspired him is he has amnesia, just like Shadow does. Okay, well, it's not exactly the same, because it's just that he doesn't remember his parents or anything before he crash landed on a planet in an escape pod when he was very young. Even in his mid-20s, he can't remember anything besides his name and some fragments of what may or may not have happened. His past is definitely going to come up in a future story, or stories, depending on how things go. But one thing I wanted to do with his character is I wanted to have most of his stories end with him incurring some kind of misfortune, or facing some sort of consequences for the things he does or doesn't do. Those consequences being either something financial or otherwise. If I had to describe Edgy's personality in one word, it would be a menace. If you've ever seen CJ the Champ talk about menaces in anime, you know exactly what I mean. When it came to coming up with his personality, I wanted to make a character who was not a hero in the slightest, but not quite an irredeemable villain either. I wanted there to be moments where you might root for him or find his over-the-top violent antics funny, and times where you might actually be disgusted with what he does. I also wanted a character with attitude like a lot of characters from the 90s and early 2000s because that's what I grew up on. Fuck, I feel old for saying that. But in any other setting, I have the feeling that Edgy would be the villain, or at least one of them. One thing I didn't want to do was have him try to justify his actions in any way. Like, he's self-aware that he's a violent, angry guy who's really good at killing and blowing things up, and he just loves doing it. That's his only justification for it. It's just fun to him.
So, Wu is on Maker? HYLUS asked. Yep, it's close to me. I can go in and blow it up real quick. HYLUS leaned forward in his chair like I was standing in front of him, and then he climbed out of it and adjusted his cape. I was eager. I could cut loose, and best of all, I'd get paid for it. In my head, I was trying to figure out which weapons I'd use. Several weapons in the armory had gone unused for some time. Leveling a building would almost make up for not getting my deep-fried Selphos. Plus, it would mean the job's over, and I could get Snitch off my back. No. HYLUS spoke. What?
No. Stand down. I'll handle it.
Oh, come on, HYLUS! You haven't let me destroy something in months! I growled. This looked like a job for me. I needed something fun to do aside from video games.
No,
HYLUS muttered.
we will come up with a plan of attack and strike.
Why? A few hours is all I need to handle this.
Edgy, you are not concerned with stopping Dr. Wu. You only want to go so you can cause more wanton destruction.
You're goddamn right. With all the boring shit you've had me do, let me do something fun.
Now, he does have some lines he won't cross, or at least he's not going to cross them without a very good reason. While he won't go out of his way to deliberately kill civilians, if civilian casualties end up happening due to just simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time when he's trying to do something and going on a rampage, or doing whatever someone paid him to do, he's not going to lose sleep over it. He typically doesn't mess with people unless they mess with them first, unless they're, for example, the target of a bounty he's trying to claim, or they get in his way and don't move when he makes it clear in no uncertain terms that he will kill them if they don't. Dude's a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and unfortunately the way he gets his adrenaline is by causing carnage, mayhem, and destruction. And it wouldn't shock me if he was diagnosed with pyromania. Now to think about it, is there a term for people who loves blowing things up? Is that included in pyromania? I don't think it is. I'll have to look that up later. But if there is a term for that, people who just like blowing things up, Edgy has that too.
There was an entire jumbled up multiverse to explore. And if there was one thing I knew, there were plenty of ways to make money and plenty of chances to blow some shit up.
His affinity for guns would make even some of the most pro-Second Amendment people look at him like he was crazy. I remember there used to be this meme, I don't think it's popular anymore, where people would say they would want no restrictions on guns so they can legally own nuclear weapons. Edgy is that, but he's not joking. It's not a bit, because he has a mini nuke launcher.
A mini nuke launcher? Zoltar exclaimed, looking at the large, dark gray gun with a long barrel ending in petal shapes that closed around and sealed it up when not in use. Yeah, that's custom. Added an auto-loader so I can fire 4 without needing to load it. His mushroom cap twitched as I told him this.
Why would you need 4 of them?
I shrugged. You never know when 4 soccer ball-sized city-destroying bombs could come in handy, especially out here in the EdgeWorlds. Zoltar looked at the black case next to the gun and yanked it down. He sat it on the table and opened it. When he saw what was inside, he was shaking with anger.
You have 4 miniature thermonuclear bombs. Why?
So I can use the launcher with a full mag. I smirked. Zoltar was about to have a stroke. Relax, I haven't used that on anyone yet.
Yet?
Do you have any idea how goddamn expensive those 4 bombs are? Few places sell them. For good reason.
I figured him having a ridiculous arsenal of weapons could lead to some comedy and absurdity with just how devastating some of the things he has are. I also think he's an example of the kind of people that anarchy and the EdgeWorlds can create, but even he is a bit of an extreme case. He does have a sense of humor, although it's a bit dark. He's the kind of person who'd watch someone get horribly murdered a few feet from him, and he'd find something funny about that, or the way it happened. Edgy is also ridiculously impulsive, and that tends to get him into a lot of trouble that he could otherwise avoid. Does he learn from his mistakes? That's debatable. In terms of things he does care about, he cares deeply for his 2 friends, who are the closest thing he has to a family at this point, Jeff and Todd. Those 2 are some of the only people he would go out of his way to help, and for good reason, because they went out of their way to help him when they were kids. And if there's one thing that will really tick Edgy off besides, well, it'd probably be easier to come up with a list of things that don't piss him off. But one thing that would really piss him off is hurting either one of them. I guess that's one of his few redeeming qualities. The other thing he cares about a lot is his ship, the Vermilion. It's a ship that was given to him in exchange for working with a character that I'll talk about later called Lord HYLUS. If you watched the last video on the setting, that name should be familiar. But Lord HYLUS is one of the EdgeLords and controls a portion of Shard, the organization Edgy sort of works for. But Edgy loves having a ship, especially one as nice as the Vermilion, because it's a replica of the starships that Penguins used to make before their homeworld mysteriously vanished. What actually happened to their planet, that's gonna come up eventually. We'll get there when we get there. But Edgy's love for that ship is like a car enthusiast getting the dream car, but maybe a little bit more extreme. Although, to be fair to the guy, since he doesn't like staying in one place for too long, that ship is basically his home. Think of it like an RV, except one that flies in space and has a bunch of weapons on it. but it being threatened set off one of Edgy's most infamous crash outs that has an entire story to itself.
And he drew something else and pulled the trigger. With a bright-ass flash, the bombs went off. The entire hangar rocked as the explosions demolished the ship. Todd and I had to pull back as bits of it flew at us. As I poked my head out of the hole, I saw the damage. Orange and blue fire swallowed the red and black ship. I doubt it could fly now, not without some serious repairs. Especially as one arm came undone and broke off the main body. Despite all of that, Edgy didn't move a muscle. Sewell's tune changed when he heard a growl from Edgy. I felt it from across the room. The place was heating up. The surrounding air rippled. Edgy was surrounded by a red-orange aura, and his coat and hair billowed as if caught in a wind. Edgy looked up. His eyes glowed red. He was shaking, and the veins in his face pushed against the skin like he was about to pop an artery, or several. He was beyond pissed. I thought I knew what was coming next. "Waste him!" Sewell screamed. Their bullets didn't touch him. Whenever Edgy gets really fucking mad, things explode, melt, or burn.
Edgy doesn't usually get along well with others besides Jeff and Todd. He doesn't like being told what to do or what he can or can't do. And he'll sometimes defy orders from HYLUS just out of pure spite, usually to his detriment. In terms of what his goals are, well, as I said earlier, Edgy is mega impulsive and short-sighted, and he seeks instant gratification. If you asked him a question like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" his answer would likely be something unserious, and it wouldn't be anything profound or meaningful at all. Probably be something like him consuming copious amounts of alcohol while blasting metal music, or getting into a random shootout somewhere, or buying a random upgrade for his ship. In the short term, his goals are to make money, to buy more guns, ship upgrades, booze, and food. He also wants to explore and visit worlds he's never seen before. Money troubles are a persistent issue for Edgy, something I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. Though in Edgy's case, it's usually self-inflicted, either by him impulse buying, paying for medical treatment due to fights he's instigated, or ship repairs. When he was younger, he did have a long-term goal. You see, there's a penguin he idolized, and he still kinda does. It's a pilot that became a hero named Ace Starborn. Dude was a legend and the most feared and respected pilot in the EdgeWorlds, because he was just that good no one could really touch him. Edgy, like a lot of penguin kids, looked up to him and wanted to be like him. But I think some of the instructions were a bit unclear because Ace was a clear-cut hero, and Edgy is, well, he's not that. But Edgy loves collecting model kits of his ship, the Azure Flash, and although Ace has been MIA for years, part of him hopes to one day meet him, even though he knows deep down Ace would not like him at all because of his antics. Part of him does want to know more about his past, but that's kind of an afterthought most of the time. There's something I haven't talked about yet with Edgy, and it's pretty central to his character. So remember how I said he has quite the temper? Well, there's another aspect to it. For currently unknown reasons, Edgy has access to a destructive power that is fueled by his anger, and it coats him in an orange-red aura and causes him to radiate heat. He can use this power to send out waves of destructive energy that can make things explode, melt, get vaporized, or catch fire. Think of it like Shadow's Chaos Blast ability, but way more destructive because it can actually kill people. How or why he has these powers is a mystery because it's fueled by Edgy's anger and means it activates often. And sometimes he doesn't even realize it. On top of turning him to a walking WMD, it makes him far more aggressive, numbs his sense of pain, and it turns off that part of the brain that limits how much of your body's strength you have access to at a given time. So basically when he's using his powers, it's like an adrenaline rush, but like cranked up to 11.
I would have believed you if you told me someone just detonated a small thermonuclear warhead. My visor dimmed and protected me from the bright red flash, but the sounds made me cover my ear holes. Jeff was doing the same. Even at a distance, I could feel the heat. The snow in the air vaporized from it. Enormous cracks formed in the glacier as I felt the ice beneath my feet turn into slush. I used the zoom feature on my visor and saw him. Edgy stood atop a destroyed hover tank, surrounded by blue fire. The fuel cells must have ruptured from the explosion. His torn, burning jacket billowed like a torn cape. As the red aura coiled around him, he looked like a demon, and his body trembled with unhinged anger. He turned towards us, and I saw the glow from his eyes shining through his blood-soaked red hair. Every vein was forced against his skin and glowed like molten metal. There was so much blood covering him, I couldn't see his white feathers anymore. Edgy then slammed his flippers into the metal, denting it with each strike. He was trying to kill the surviving pilots inside. Some soldiers shot at him. Their energy rounds hit him, and he seemed to feel it. He pounced them like an animal and began pulling them apart. My stomach was in knots as I watched a few panic and run in terror. Edgy ran them down like a rabid dog.
But this tremendous power comes at a massive cost. For one, the angrier he is, the harder it is for him to control it. And if it gets bad enough, he'll basically go into a feral state. And while he's normally pretty merciless when it comes to his enemies, in this state he's even worse, and he'll struggle differentiating between friend or foe. Edgy's lack of control can be chalked up to two things. One, him already being enraged, and second, him enjoying the rush he gets when he lets his power loose. Him trying to control it is like trying to control a supercar that's got the gas pedal all the way to the floor and the brakes don't work. And even if you let your foot off the gas, it's still going at top speed. Like, the best you could do is try and aim it. You're not really stopping it. But the other drawback is that all of that power comes at a cost. It literally rips him apart. The longer he's in that state, the worse the damage is. It got so bad in one of the stories it almost killed him. Every major muscle in his body had been torn apart and he had to spend months in intensive medical care to repair the damage. Where these powers come from and how he got them is a mystery that will be explored later on, as other aspects of his character are also explored. And there's a lot of directions his character could go in, and some stories I've got planned that I'm working on now have some stuff exploring his relationship with others and his mindset when it comes to certain things. For example, in the latest story that's currently only on my website, Dr. Aurora and the Devil Bloom, you get some insight into his relationship towards Jeff and Todd and how they all react when Edgy's dealt some pretty dire news. Well, I've been yapping about one character for a long time. This video's not just about him. Move over, dude. The inspiration for Jeff wasn't that specific. I based them off of the general surfer / stoner type. I thought having a chill, goofy character would be a good contrast to Edgy, as Jeff rarely gets angry and he doesn't have much of a temper. That might be because he's high all the time, he's too high to get mad at things. I wanted Jeff to actually be a bit of a foil, and there's some instances where Jeff's actions are the catalyst for the misadventures that Edgy gets into. Now that I think about it, in two of the stories the whole conflict happens because of something Jeff did. Okay, to be fair, one of those might be a little bit debatable, because there's no way he could have known something that bad would have happened. But like I said, Jeff is a stoner and a goofball. He likes getting high all day, stuffing his face, partying, hitting on chicks, growing and selling weed, and making and selling trash beats online. Jeff is a go-with-the-flow type and really lets things get him down, which causes him to piss Edgy off at times, because Jeff will sometimes spend money that Edgy doesn't have and not see why that's a problem. Despite his chill demeanor, he does care about Edgy and Todd, and surprisingly enough, he's older than both of them. Yeah, he's the eldest of the group. Jeff is just as, if not slightly more impulsive than Edgy. He also really likes gambling. Specifically, gambling Edgy's money, which often leads to him getting into trouble.
How's it going? Jeff looked up at me.
Bad question, Todd.
He said before inhaling his blunt. Jeff's side of the table showed how much money he had versus how much he started with. When I saw how many units he lost, my beak hit the floor. How did you lose that much? I screeched at the top of my lungs. I realized it wasn't the crucial question. Jeff, where did you get all that money? He didn't answer me and flagged a waiter for a fancy drink. Jeff, where did this money come from? He took another puff of his joint.
I used the ship to get more chips.
My jaw dropped to the floor and vanished into space. My heart was about to explode out of my chest. My legs buckled and I collapsed into the seat beside Jeff. You did what? Jeff winced at my high-pitched scream.
Todd, relax. I can win it all back. I still got chips.
He only had 2 chips left.
It's safe to say Jeff has a bit of a gambling problem. Keep him away from your credit card at all costs. You know what, now that I think about it, don't let any of them have your credit card if you like your account being in the black. Jeff's got a bit of a hippie vibe to him, and he's also the most outgoing of the trio, often dragging either Todd or Edgy, or both, to parties or social events at bars, when both of them would prefer not to be there, and they either just chill on the ship or in Edgy's case go find a quiet bar to get absolutely plastered in. Jeff, and he'll tell you this himself, he isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, and that causes things to go over his head, especially when Todd gets into the technobabble. But that also causes him to do things you probably wouldn't expect someone to do. Like hitting on a trained assassin that wants you dead while she's trying to stab you to death.
Can I say one thing before you kill me? I asked. She paused. Her eyes got narrow.
What?
Damn, you fine. Like, seriously? Your face is a 20 out of 10, and your body is too. I mean, pardon my language, but you put the double S in assassin. Holy shit. She glared at me. She wore a look of shock and fury. You'd think calling her drop-dead gorgeous would calm her down. Somehow she wanted to murder me even more.
What is wrong with you?
Todd shouted. Hey man, I'm stating facts. I turned back to her. Absolute bombshell.
They're shooting your shot, and then there's whatever the hell that is. Like Edgy, Jeff doesn't really think that far ahead. Honestly, I think the phrase thinking might even be a strong word for him. Maybe if he wasn't getting high all the time, that would change. But like Edgy, if you asked him where he'd be in 5 years, his answer would be something unserious. It'd probably be something like chilling on a beach with a hot babe, a stiff drink, and a fat joint. He's pretty aimless and doesn't really concern himself with the future beyond a couple of days at most, and that's probably being generous. Sort of like Edgy, except he's way more carefree about it and he doesn't enjoy fighting people. If you asked Edgy and Todd how they feel about Jeff, they would say he's way too carefree. Todd especially would say that. Speaking of Todd, you ever see Ed, Edd and Eddy, the Cartoon Network show? Yeah, Todd is basically the double D of the group. He's super smart, but he's a nervous wreck and a bit of a wimp. A bit. I think I'm giving him too much credit. I think I have somewhere in my notes that Todd is the kind of person who would be paralyzed with fear at the idea of making a phone call or having to place a delivery order. That's the caliber of character we're dealing with here. He's a shut-in nerd who rarely leaves his room and binges anime, video games, random shit on the internet, and reads a bunch of manga and books. Oh wait, I'm kinda just describing myself now. Moving on. Todd, 90% of the time, is in some sort of state of panic.
The number of people increased as we got closer to the club. It made me want to return to the ship and binge another season of anime I bought from interdimensional traders. My flippers shook and I found it hard to breathe as Jeff weaved between people. I kept my eyes down to the floor and whispered, "Excuse me," to anyone I bumped into. Jeff recoiled and turned to me.
I guess they weren't kidding about this place always being packed. We might be here a while.
A while? The line's going halfway around the block. We'll be stuck out here for hours, I snapped. I tried to turn around, but 3 aliens about 7 feet tall each got in line behind us. Jeff shrugged.
Relax, man. We'll be in there before you know it.
Now would be a terrible time to mention I'm profoundly agoraphobic, wouldn't it?
The guy probably has an undiagnosed anxiety disorder because he freaks out about everything, and he's always nervous, and he stutters a lot. Despite that, somehow he's not afraid to tell Edgy when he's being an idiot or doing something dumb. And even more surprisingly, sometimes Edgy will actually listen to him. Sometimes might be a bit generous. It's like an 80-20 chance that Edgy listens to him. 80% chance Edgy does not, and 20% chance that he does. Which, 20% doesn't sound high, but it's higher than when others try to tell him what to do. Unless they're paying him to do it, and even then, odds are still high he won't do exactly what you want. But Todd's also mature enough to know when trying to dissuade Edgy from doing something is a lost cause, and to just let him have it. That doesn't mean that Todd is immune to being insulted by Edgy, and in fact, he gets insulted a lot by him because Edgy finds Todd's reactions funny. However, on the flip side, Edgy won't let anyone else mess with Todd unless it's Jeff. And Jeff will rip on Todd too, but not as harshly as Edgy will. They mostly get along, but Todd can find Jeff's uncaring, laid-back nature annoying, especially when he's in the middle of a freak-out about something that it is reasonable to be concerned about. In the story, Dr. Aurora and the Devil Bloom, which is currently only on my website, in parts because it came out later than Volume 1, and will probably be in Volume 2 whenever I finish writing more stories. Should really get on that. Edgy gets sick and Todd gets angry at Jeff because Jeff refuses to take the situation seriously. At least on the surface. Todd getting angry and actually showing that he's angry is a rarity since he's usually very quiet and shy even around the people he knows. And as the youngest of the trio, Todd surprisingly has more sense than Edgy and Jeff in a lot of situations when his nerves don't get the better of him. Todd doesn't do so well in high pressure situations, but he handles them better than he thinks he does. And he has some brief moments of bravery here and there, but they're few and far between. He really doesn't like blood and gore, but he knows he has a better chance of winning the lottery 3 times in a row than in getting Edgy to not be a violent psychopath. So he just kinda has to deal with it. In terms of goals, Todd's are simple. He wants to not die horribly while living with Jeff and Edgy. He wants to continue reading his favorite manga series and watching his favorite shows to completion. Todd does actually worry about the future more than the others, and deep down he knows there's a high chance Edgy will die and not from old age or by peaceful means, and he's deeply afraid of what that will mean for him and Jeff. Since neither one of them are the kind of people that can hold a job, and they're not cut out for bounty hunting and the other dangerous jobs Edgy takes for money. Todd prefers to not think about what he'll do if something happens to Edgy, but his anxiety prevents him from completely ignoring that. If Todd has a deeper goal than that, it's probably to find a girl as dorky as he is that has similar interests to him, that he can become friends with, or more than friends with. But the issue is, Todd's got too much social anxiety to really talk to people face to face unless he already knows them. The struggle. TM. I think Todd would love to be able to just sit in his room, surrounded by the things he likes and the people he likes without having to care about anything that happens in the outside world. And I'm not gonna lie, saying that aloud, that's a mood sometimes. Moving on to the next major character. Edgelord HYLUS. He's one of the 5 leaders of Shard, an organization that has great power in the EdgeWorlds. Each leader has their own motivations and goals. HYLUS wants Shard to serve as the guardians of the EdgeWorlds. He wants the worlds to be completely autonomous, and for him and his forces to only step in when a threat arises. He also started off as a joke character on my main channel. The joke was he was Edgy's sponsor for his channel and provided him with things to make videos, although he was usually not happy with the results. In terms of what inspired him, I love a lot of fantasy stuff, and Knights and Vikings are cool as hell to me, so HYLUS has some elements of both just with some sci-fi stuff thrown in. I also wanted a character who was imposing and intimidating, but also someone who was reasonable. I mean, they'd have to be a little bit intimidating for Edgy to somewhat listen to them, and HYLUS is reasonable enough where you could disagree with him without him slicing you in half with that giant sword of his. Now that I think about it, he's kind of a slightly morally gray version of the Bayformers Optimus Prime, where he is ruthless and merciless to his enemies, but he has a sense of honor, but he's not a straight-up hero either. His backstory is currently unknown. That's because when I started writing the short stories, I hadn't settled on what his backstory was, and even now I'm still ironing out some stuff to reveal later. No one knows what he looks like without that armor on, and I'll let you in on a little secret about that.
Yes.
HYLUS is also implied to be old, like really, really, really old. The planet he rules from is called Exile, and it's covered in ancient ruined cities. He comes from a warrior culture and is a leader amongst his people, along with being one of the leaders of Shard. HYLUS has many warriors at his disposal, but he often and reluctantly relies on Edgy. How the two ended up working together is pretty nuts, and I only made a vague reference to it in one of the stories in Volume 1. But let's just say it was a rocky start. But HYLUS is a very proud and wise character, and he also has a temper just like Edgy. But unlike him, HYLUS knows when being angry is useful and when it's not. He understands that some order is necessary, but also chaos is necessary. Controlled chaos, if you will. HYLUS doesn't want to rule the Edgeworld as a tyrant, and he actively despises anyone who tries to do that. In fact, most of the worlds that he considers as part of his territory that aren't part of his original kingdom don't directly answer to him. They can call him if they need help solving a problem, but he lets them do as they please as long as they don't cause him or his men or any of his operations trouble. HYLUS is a very serious, mostly stoic character. While he is a king and leads armies, he's not afraid to lead from the front lines, and he often will because, like Edgy, he enjoys fighting. HYLUS does not use guns. He won't stop his agents from using them, but those directly part of his kingdom refuse to use them in most situations. It's part of their ancient culture. As far as his attitude towards Edgy goes, HYLUS tolerates him.
The Mantoid. I instructed you to apprehend him unharmed.
You said to bring him in alive, so I brought him in alive. HYLUS's gargantuan fist struck the table, and he leaned in a bit.
He is in a coma thanks to you.
I shrugged. So, quiz him when he wakes up. HYLUS leaned back in his chair.
I am growing tired of your rogue behavior. For example, last month you caused millions in collateral damage during a rescue mission by setting the pirate ship on a crash course with the planet below.
Hey, I had to take out the ship somehow.
You leveled half a city doing so, Edgy. Not to mention your previous job, you were supposed to secure the package and keep a low profile. Instead, you led a bloated chase across half the planet against Union, and you landed yourself on Commander Sisisnar's radar.
He went down the list, including some missions I had forgotten about. I couldn't contain my smile when he mentioned what happened on Caton 7.
He will put up with some of Edgy's antics and emphasis on the word some because he has his limits. And Edgy really loves testing those limits, usually by defying his orders. However, in certain situations, Edgy will still get the desired results. Those situations being the ones where HYLUS just needs something destroyed without having to throw a lot of his forces at it. And from a practical standpoint, why send 20 men in when one guy can do the job? You know, as long as you don't mind some collateral damage and no hope of recovering anything useful afterwards. But because of the bird's insubordination and lack of restraint, HYLUS is hesitant to let him do much else, and will rarely let him do anything else unless he has no choice. Because sometimes Edgy just happens to be in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time depending on what HYLUS needs done. Usually, Edgy causes him more headaches to the point where others in Char question why HYLUS doesn't just cut him loose. If there's one thing HYLUS respects, it is strength, and he knows it's better to have Edgy as an ally than an enemy. Especially since HYLUS is aware of Edgy's powers, and he's seen it firsthand, and he hasn't figured out a good way to counter that besides not being anywhere near it. He also, to put it bluntly, views Edgy as a living WMD. And since he's at war with Union, having someone like Edgy on standby that he can send in to inflict massive damage on Union, or anyone else that's a problem, is pretty useful.
Stopped at the viewing platform and turned back. I thought about killing him again, but something stayed my hand. He was a weapon, and we were at war. With Union growing more powerful, Edgy's power would be needed, but only if controlled.
Speaking of Union, HYLUS has no patience for them, since, as I stated in the last video, Union is an authoritarian nightmare that wants to control all aspects of their territory, and is constantly trying to expand. And while the other lords do despise and fight Union, HYLUS is probably the one committing the most forces to the cause. And that's because his primary goal is to destroy Union, because he views them as a massive threat, and not just to his people, but to the EdgeWorlds as a whole. However, he has other goals that I can't talk about yet because I'm still figuring things out. As I said, he's the most mysterious character by far, and it wasn't 100% by choice, because he had a completely different backstory in mind before I started ironing things out, and a lot of stuff still isn't set in stone with him. But let's just say he had a completely different, pretty out there reason for keeping Edgy around and trying to give him orders. But future stories will start to reveal more about HYLUS and his backstory. I have notes for one of them ready to get turned into an outline that's already sitting on my computer. Then I got another story, or I should say stories, before I get to that one. On to the last major character. Well, the last major character I have art for, right now at least. The Robo-Dork. So, MEEKA 227, or just MEEKA for short, was a character that went through a lot of changes. She almost didn't make it into Volume 1 because I was struggling to figure out what to do with her. Originally, she was going to be a straight man and an antagonist for Edgy. Notice I didn't say villain because she was a bounty hunter with a moral code. Pun not intended. She only took jobs to hunt down objectively terrible people for the right reasons. Oftentimes the money she earned, she was supposed to just donate it, well, most of it, to like a noble cause. The only thing she would keep is for ship maintenance. But the original plan was that while the Penguins were laying low somewhere, she was going to show up to try and collect a bounty on Edgy's head. And then something was going to happen to force the two to reluctantly work together. but it was clear that it was a temporary truce and that once the situation was resolved, she was going to try and collect that bounty again. In the end, Edgy was going to somehow get away, either by MEEKA deliberately letting him go, or he was going to sabotage her somehow. At one point, she was supposed to show up in the Callisto incident story while Edgy, Jeff, and Todd were trying to chill at a casino station, but then, well, stuff happened, and that story was already pretty long and had just had a lot going on with it, so I had to remove her from that. But I didn't want the first volume to end on an odd number of stories. I don't know why, I just like even numbers for things. So I thought, why not just give her a story to herself where she's the main focus? In my old notes, she was meant to be a no-nonsense, stoic combat android that was always serious, but I realized I was just writing Sierra, who's a character from my other books that I should probably talk about on this channel at some point, so I scrapped her personality entirely. I thought since the main thing I wanted was for these stories to be a mix of comedy and action, to give her a funny personality, and after brainstorming for a while, I came to the conclusion that having a hyper-advanced, deadly combat android but making her a gigantic dork who is also extremely clumsy would make for a funny character concept.
I took a step towards the chasm's edge. The ground gave way beneath me. I screamed as I plummeted through the air, and my arms flailed about in a panic. My trademark clumsiness reared its ugly head as I slammed against the rocky wall with a booming thud and bounced off it like a pinball. The ground was coming up fast. I activated my stabilizers, but I didn't have enough time. I crashed into the bedrock face first, leaving a deep imprint in the ground. Marinating in my clumsiness, I lay there for a few seconds. "Well, that's one way to land, I suppose," Queen remarked. "Yeah." I winced and stood up. I did a quick system check. No damage besides my pride, I guess. "Good job, MEEKA," Queen exclaimed as a hologram of her face appeared on the console. "Go. I'll escort the miners to safety." I nodded and dived through the glass. I didn't stick the landing and crashed headfirst into a weapons rack, causing a loud cacophony of metal slamming against metal. As I rose, I felt Queen judging me. I'm sure clumsiness is not what she was hoping for when she designed my line of combat androids.
So that's what I went with. Back when she was mega serious, the main inspiration for her was Samus from Metroid, and that's why she has an arm cannon. I wanted her to contrast a character like Edgy, who was cynical and morally gray, so she's optimistic and morally white. I also realized in my notes I didn't have a good backstory for her, so I changed that to her being from a planet where the entire population are advanced androids and the planet is controlled by 2 AIs. These AIs used to run the planet together, but they had a falling out at some point, and they now just take turns and are mega petty towards each other. The reason why she's called MEEKA 227 is because the first 2 is the series number. She's a MEEKA 2 series android, and the 27 is her unit number, so she's the 27th MEEKA 2 unit. Oh, and despite her personality, she's old, around 1300 years old, to be specific. Her backstory on her home planet is something that will be expanded upon later because I couldn't fit it into the story I ended up writing for the first volume. But to give a really basic explanation, she wanted to leave her home planet and convince the AI that made her, which is named Queen, to let her take a ship to go out into the EdgeWorlds to be a hero, like the comic book she loved reading online. But there was one condition. An instance of the Queen AI had to tag along and serve as the ship's computer. Since she was getting bored while being stuck in a support role while the other AI named King was in charge, figuring out that backstory helped me flesh out her character more because since the people on her planet mostly keep to themselves, she doesn't deal with organic beings often, so she would be awkward around them. So she's basically a fish out of water, and she's surprisingly naive despite being over 1300 years old. And while she's book smart, in the sense that she can pull information from different databases online, she's not exactly street smart. She likes cute shit, which contrasts heavily with the fact that if she needed to, she could kill you in less than 2 seconds. Not that she would unless you were really doing something vile. Unlike Edgy, MEEKA doesn't often kill. Her arm cannon has a stun bow and she tends to use that when dealing with bounties. She prefers the people she catches stand trial for their crimes. She doesn't like being the judge, jury, and executioner, although sometimes she has to. In terms of goals, she wants to be the greatest hero the EdgeWorlds have ever seen. Pretty reasonable, down-to-earth goal, am I right? And she also wants to see the EdgeWorlds and help anyone and everyone that needs her help. Of course, that's impossible. You can't just help everyone, especially not by yourself. And her maker often reminds her that she just can't save everyone. She also gets told this by the mechanic that lives on her ship and fixes her up anytime she gets damaged.
What do we do?" She asked in a soft voice that didn't match her lean and toned body. The distress beacon is still on. Maybe there are survivors on the planet? Choo-Choo folded her arms. Meeka, this smells like a trap. Doesn't the mining company have its own fleet? We should sit this one out. But what if there's still survivors? We can't leave them to fend for themselves. Choo-Choo sighed. We can't save everyone. Despite that being an accurate, logical statement, I still wanted to take action to save them. I paused and brought my hand under my chin. I'd seen many organics do this to signal that they were thinking. Shaking my head, my long artificial black hair with a glowing violet interior got in my optics for a moment.
I would talk about Meeka's mechanic, Choo-Choo, real name Nyarla, in this video, but I don't have art for her right now, and the script is going on 13 pages right now, and I have to record and edit all of this together. But I just thought having a naive, upbeat, altruistic character in a setting that is comically dangerous, and with a lot of characters that are not good people, would make for an interesting contrast, and I think it'd be interesting to see how her worldview will change as she explores the EdgeWorlds more and more. Will she meet up with the penguins at some point? Yeah, it'll happen. Eventually. Maybe. Alright, I've talked your head off enough. I'll have to do this for the Renegade series, but I know that video is going to be extremely long since there's a lot of characters in that, since it's a team of heroes with their own backstories and storylines. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Then again, I'll have to make another video about characters in the EdgeWorlds in the future because there's some other important characters that I'm working on and will introduce at some point, and I'm gonna have to commission people to draw them. Now that I think about it, I need more art for everyone so these videos aren't just a beach background, even though it's a pretty chill aesthetic, and I've spent a lot of time making this. Anyway, let me know what you guys think, and which character do you like the most? Which one would you like to see more of? And if you have read Tales of the EdgeWorlds Volume 1, which character was your favorite? And if you haven't yet, consider checking it out on Amazon. Thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, please leave a like and consider subbing, and have a good one.